and welcome back to the Common Threads podcast. I'm your host, Kate Hall, and today we have an amazing guest, one of my favorite people of all time, Colton Staheli. Colton was born and raised in Washington, Utah, and now lives in Provo with his wife, Malia, who I actually interviewed last week. Colton is a member of the LDS Church and served a 2-year mission in Santiago, Chile. He recently graduated from BYU in construction management and now works for a commercial general contractor. And just a quick plug, if you haven't already, go listen to Malia's episode, Colton's wife. I'm going to be asking Colton a few of the same questions. And so it's going to be cool to hear like how their answers are similar and different. And so yeah, go listen to that one. But yeah, Colton, how are you?
I'm better now, Kate. It's been too long since we've talked, and we're long time best friends, and you and your husband, and it's like I say, it's been too long, but
Yeah.
I've been looking forward to this, and glad to be talking. I will agree with you. If you should just change the episode right now if you haven't listened to Malia's, because I've grown a lot just from listening to her. I mean, I've had 4+ years, and hopefully you'll get something out of the hour that her interview was. But I would definitely say that.
Yeah, she's incredible. Her interview was awesome. And yeah, it's gonna be great to catch up. I'm excited to hear your story and to share this with everyone. So thank you for being here today. So I wanted to start with some early childhood experiences. You grew up in kind of a small town in southern Utah. And if anyone listening knows anything about St. George, Washington area, you'll probably recognize Colton's last name. The Staheli's kind of run everything down in Washington. And so I guess my first question for you is like, do you feel like that name, do you feel like that impacted your life at all? Do you feel like that you maybe had like any higher expectation growing up because of like who your family is and just everyone knows the Staheli's down there, you know?
Yeah, exactly. If you've lived in, especially Washington City, a little bit in St. George, but for much more than a couple of years, you've definitely run into at least one of us in whatever walk of life you're in, and it definitely impacted me. I would see my father and my aunts and uncles, my grandparents, just involved in so many different community things, and so I kind of growing up, I kind of grew up that was the norm. And then as I would mature and learn more about the world, that's not necessarily the norm. People, just a lot of people just live in the towns that they live in, and keep to their close circle, and there's nothing wrong with that. uh but uh but yeah, it definitely impacted uh how I what I looked for in my life going forward, and in what me and my wife are trying to do now. I'm sure we'll get into what life looks like for us in the coming years, but we definitely, wherever we are, we want to be involved and try and get involved in different things to just meet incredible people, because they're great people all around.
Yeah, incredible. And so your family growing up, were they very politically active? Did you guys talk about politics a lot in your house, or was it kind of just like more as you got older?
Nothing was blatantly political. Not, I shouldn't say nothing, but around election years, it would spike a little bit. We'd talk about around presidential debates and things like that. And I'm the youngest child of five, and my nearest sibling is 4 years older than me, and so I didn't really get a sense of what politics meant, and what it means to form political beliefs until later in high school, probably. And by then all my siblings were moved out, and so I would say there wasn't a ton of political talk in my family, even though then I could tell that we were somewhat of the conservative leaning, at least my parents. But I've found recently, since not recently, but in the years since my mission, where all my siblings were all now adults, I can see, my siblings, all but one are on the left side of the political aisle, um, and the other one is essentially moderate, not swaying too much to the other, one side or the other. And then I'm conservative, ascribe to conservative values and aims. So it's it's been an interesting life for sure, as far as seeing what, how politics looks in my family of origin. That but I it's been enjoyable. I love getting together with all of my family, and just our conversations. Sometimes they bring politics gets involved, and we talk about it, and it's never uncivil or malicious. It's always, people are listening, and that's what I really enjoy about conversations like that.
It's really cool that you've got some siblings kind of on the opposite side from you, and you're able to kind of see their perspectives and have an open mind. And I don't know, I think that's just a really cool environment to live in and to grow up in. You mentioned your parents were more conservative leaning, and I've mentioned this so many times on this podcast, but just that St. George is a very conservative
Yeah.
place. Do you feel like, obviously, like your parents were also like subscribed to that kind of thinking and those ideas, but do you feel like, in your community, in church, in school, like, do you feel like that was kind of the mainstream idea as well? Or were you kind of met with some different ideas and opinions?
I would say that was the majority, not to say that it was a vast majority. Um, I had plenty of friends that really didn't care much about politics, or cared and had different beliefs than me. Um, but I would say, yeah, Southern Utah is yeah, I don't know if they've had a elected a whether to the state house, or whether to the state Congress, or the national Congress. It's probably been a long time since they've elected a Democrat. There's probably a general consensus as far as one side or the other, um, which I'm totally fine with, and um, I'm fine living in a conservative area, or a more liberal area. There, like I said earlier, there are good people in all different places, and a lot of the times you can find things that unite us, that unite, whatever group of people you're in. Sometimes it's harder to find that, but it's worth it to find that.
Yeah. You mentioned that in high school, kind of in your later high school years, was when you started to kind of think more about politics. Was there like a specific incidents that happened? Was there like an experience that you had that started you thinking more in politics, or just kind of a general, like, it just kind of came onto your mind more
Well,
generally? I don't know.
that's kind of I feel like high school. I mean, the American experience. High school is when you start to take classes, that talk about, you know American history, and the the sways in American culture. What different trends have ebbed and flowed, and then also, like, current issues. You and I both know Coach Holt pretty well, and he was our professor of a current issues class that we would take, and that's what kind of made me start to try to think deeply about those things. What is the context of the conversation? What are all the impacts of leaning a certain way? What if you take a certain decision? Where does that lead? And what's the natural, um, like I say, the natural consequences of a line of thinking? That's something that, like you mentioned in high school, that's kind of when I started to do that, and something that I still really try to do is when a topic is brought up, if I haven't already thought about it, for hours and over a long time, I really want to think about that and what its impacts are on the things that are most important to me.
Mhm. So, moving along just a little bit, you graduate high school and then you moved pretty quickly after graduating to Chile to start your LDS mission. What was it like moving away from home for the first time and moving to like a completely different part of the world, completely different background than what you experienced in Southern Utah? Yeah, like what was that whole experience like?
Uh, it was uh, it was awesome. I'll say that. Yeah, it was pretty soon after I graduated, about a month. Went down to Chile immediately. Um, a lot of people do there. You'll have a couple of weeks when you become a missionary. You'll have a couple of weeks, depending on the circumstances of your assignment, whether you're going to learn a language or whatever it is. You'll have several weeks before you actually go to your area of assignments. You'll learn how to be a missionary. You'll learn the language that you're assigned to preach the gospel in. Um, and I did all of my training like that in Chile, so there wasn't really much of a transition as far as as far as transitioning from one culture to another, or one experience to another. But I honestly loved it. A lot of people might might want to do it a different way, but it seems to be the right way for me to just get right into it, get my feet wet, and I learned a lot of things about life, about people, and about culture from going to Chile, being there for a little less than 2 years. I was there from 2000 summer of 2018 to spring of 2020, right around when the COVID pandemic plagued the world. Was introduced to us. But within those about 21 months, it was things that I think about on a daily basis, just experiences and people that I think about every day.
Yeah. I know this isn't like the main focus of serving an LDS mission, but obviously, I mean, you were there for a substantial amount of time. But what were like some of the political dynamics going on at the time in Chile? I don't know if that like you noticed anything, if you were like more in rural or more like towards the capital area. But yeah, just some of the things that you noticed while you were there.
So my whole encompassing area of assignment was called the Santiago West mission. Santiago is the capital of Chile, and so several of within those 21 months, I was in about 5 different areas, and 3 of those were very heavily populated urban city areas, and then 2 others were more rural, about an hour and a half outside of the main city of Santiago. And but Kate, I was in Chile for a political breaking point for the Chilean people. Near in October of 2019 there was a nationwide, and again, Chile is uh, about what would it be, about 3,000 miles north to south, and then about 100 miles east to west. But from Arica, that's in the north, to Punta Arenas, that's in the south. Everywhere, a political uprising, the people against the federal government. Just that was violent and very loud, for sure. People in the streets daily for several weeks. Um, I don't recall there. I don't know specifically if there were many deaths, whether it be of civilians or of first responders, but it was violent, and there were many days within those several weeks in 2019 that we couldn't leave our house just for safety and risk. reasons. And I would talk to, you know, the people that we would teach and the members of the church that we would work with down there, about, you know, what kind of things are bringing this about. You know, it's passion, it's very voiced and passionate. What kind of things, and it seemed to me like the what I gathered was that the people just felt like the government, the federal government, and probably the local governments as well. I'm not totally sure about that, but just taking advantage uh, of the people, trying to, you know, nickel and dime them for different things that the people felt wouldn't have made a difference in the grand scheme of things, but for the leaders of the government, but things for them that were very necessary to get by. And it's they just kind of reached a breaking point. And I actually had a episode of appendicitis
Mm.
right in the heart of that thing, which is a whole other story that's for another day. But
Oh my gosh.
it was uh it was definitely another eye-opening experience about how a government relates to its people, and then how the people relate to its government, and how that dynamic should function. You know, if a people is not pleased with how they're being represented, what are the proper channels of voicing that in a way that things can still function, um, but but still, you know, definitely make their voice heard, um,
Mhm.
which which I and then I'll go ahead and give my opinion on that, on how that went.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I don't agree with the general way of how the rioters, manifestors carried out their business. A lot of damage was done. I'm sure a lot of lives were very negatively impacted, and probably are still recovering to this day, whether it be of injury or financial financial uh, items. I thought it was very violent and very uncivil. Um, um, and that's speaking nothing about, you know, whether I think that their reasons were warranted for, but the way they went about it, I did not support. And I think that there are ways of protesting, you know, and then, you know, a good government ought to provide ways to vote for things that citizens care about. Um, and yeah, it was not in my opinion, not a good time for Chile. I'm sure there are plenty of other people, especially Chilean citizens, you know, that felt that was a shining moment in their history. And but I would disagree.
Mm. That's a really unique perspective to share, being there like during that whole time, being present, being proximate to all these people. And yeah, that's got to be such a unique experience. Did this impact anything about how you saw politics and government when you got back to the States? How you saw the US government?
It's hard to say how direct of an impact that had, because I came back to the United States at such a weird time with COVID and being an election year. It was a political environment and a political age that I doubt will ever be. Definitely, it will never be duplicated, and I doubt there will ever be anything very much like it. You know, having those two major world impacting events collide at the exact same time. So it's hard to say if you know directly right when I got back how that affected my political views. But I'd say generally my views on my political views were influenced by some experiences on my mission. For example, uh, Chileans do not have the right to have an unhindered right to bear arms, to have weapons in their house, whether they be guns or I honestly don't know much. I don't know if that would affect like knives and other weapons, but guns, that was um, it's a very, very difficult process to obtain guns in Chile, and to use them is a whole other story. Uh, and Yeah, that's not a right that the citizens have, and there were areas that people were not able to defend themselves, areas that um, had high rates of crime, of robberies. I was mugged once on my mission. Not to say that it warranted me having a gun. I guess I shouldn't necessarily be linking those two conversation pieces, but there are areas in Santiago, especially that yeah, if I were a full-time resident in Chile, I would definitely want a way of protecting my family. And in my opinion, they without that right, I don't feel like families and individuals have a way of doing that in any you know in any significant way.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So shifting topics just a little bit, you mentioned
That's
you
good.
came home. You mentioned you came home like right in the middle of COVID in the spring of 2020. And I've had a few people on the podcast talk about how difficult a time it was for them. And I'm just curious, like, what was your experience coming home, like having left and coming back to a completely new environment than when you left?
It was hard. I'll say it was hard for sure. I think um, it was hard to not be able to, for one, go to church. There were probably a span of 3 or 4 months where church services were canceled in a public format, and it was hard to have to be so careful and cautious about just meeting up with people that you care about and wanna spend time with. It was hard because I just came off of a experience in which I was so just engaged, and so um, every day was really getting to work and being with people, talking to um, probably thousands of people over those months, and then such an abrupt change where if you see anyone, you better be careful and better be um, take precaution. That was a difficult transition. I think overall I handled it pretty well, but yeah, and having to start college, just a couple, I think got back in March and started college in September. So um, and college was also not the experience I had envisioned at least my first semester. Not what I envisioned. Not what I envisioned college would be before that reason of COVID, and yeah.
Yeah, definitely a weird time. I remember we used to go and like our friend group would sit in like a parking lot and we'd all like spread out 6 feet and we'd just like
Mhm.
chat out in the middle of a parking lot just because that's the only way we could like be together. And yeah,
Yeah,
definitely a really weird time.
I will say that was a great summer in that we played pickleball 4 or 5 times a week, and
Yeah,
and oh, I those were great times for that. I just love pickleball, and we played a lot.
we
That
did.
we played a lot.
Went on a lot of hikes and yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, it was very interesting. So I'm curious, and I do want to get into like your college experience, your first but I'll ask just one more follow-up question for like COVID. But I'm curious to ask because Southern Utah was a very interesting place to be during the pandemic, and I'll just give a little bit of background because I also lived in Washington during the first half of
Mm-hmm.
2020. But we had a lot of people like flat out denying that COVID was real. We had a lot of anti-vaxxers. And it was also interesting because the LDS Church is very predominant in Southern Utah, and there was a huge
Mm-hmm.
shift from members who like initially were very against getting the vaccine, and then church leadership came out and said like vaccines are safe, everyone should get them, and a lot of people kind of shifted their mindset. And I'm just curious, like with all of that like kind of going on around you, did that affect like how you viewed politics and religion at the time? In general, but like more specific to like the pandemic, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Now, I will say, and this is just me trying to recall what I recall. I remember the church um, giving direction on masks and whether members should follow mask guidelines, wearing masks in public. Um, that was generally that they should. I genuinely don't recall what direction they gave, if they gave any direction on vaccines. They very well could have. I just genuinely don't remember. But yeah, the it's hard for me to blame anyone during during that time, whether it be government leaders or church leaders, because I again and this has already been mentioned once. It was no one's that's something you can't really see coming, um, and I it's it seemed to be quite, if not completely, unprecedented, and there was such little reaction time, and it's very easy to look back now and say, okay, this is what we should have done, and I do have those views of what we should have done, but um, we're working with imperfect people that you hope and I feel like you should give the benefit of the doubt that they're doing things in the interest of those they serve. Um, that it does no good to to harp on those people and call them names or berate them, um, because again it was such an unprecedented time and but it was very easy to with a lot of those policies that were implemented. I'm speaking from more of a government and a political standpoint, less about what guidance the church gave to its members. It was very easy in that time to get heated and get fired up, and I there were few, but I'm sure there were times that I did get heated, and I regret those times. It's something since then that I've really tried to, whatever the hot topic political issue of the day is, um, it's definitely okay to have an opinion about it, and I ought to listen to what other people have to say about it. But it's not okay to to let yourself start to view that person or that group as less than or evil. I don't share that view. It very well could be that your goals and your views are completely the opposite, and you sincerely hope that their views are not implemented and become the popular view. Um, but that's, to me, the extent of that is telling them that, saying, I don't agree with that. I think that's very harmful and would lead to an overall decline in our culture. Um, and you leave it there. um, I mean, I've kind of, sorry, I've kind of strayed. It's kind of your question kind of led me on a one thing after another thing, but uh, that was an interesting time that brought the worst out of a lot of people. But again, as I look back on it now, it does no good, and I genuinely don't want to blame anyone for the course of action that they followed. If they did it genuinely, just trying to do what was right and trying to best serve those that they were accountable for and accountable to.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. No, I think that's a really cool take. I know, there were a lot of times that I had during the pandemic where I was like, no, we should be doing this and it should be this way. And looking back, like I've had similar like moments of, oh, I probably should have given people a little more grace because there was a lot of fear, a lot of people not knowing what to do, and I can imagine just wanting to protect themselves and protecting their families. And yeah, so I think it was a good like reflection time for all of us. So I really appreciate that sentiment and not
Mm-hmm.
like judging people during times of chaos when we truly don't know what's going to happen from day to day. So,
You proceed with what you have, and as you learn truth that maybe alters what you knew before, then you redirect and you correct the course of the ship,
mhm.
um, based on as you learn truth.
Yeah, no, I think that's really cool. So, shifting gears a little bit, you moved to Provo at some point after you got back from your mission, still during the pandemic. Were they like your first couple semesters, were they in-person classes at all, or were they all online?
I can say I never had a semester that was completely online. Um,
Hmm.
Although, my first two semesters there was a mask mandate. If we had an in-person class, we needed to be wearing a mask. Um, I would say the majority of students, honestly, the vast majority of students did follow that when we were, on campus. There were some that they would, try as much as you can to not wear them, and I honestly wasn't too bothered by them. I know it was a lot more sensitive for others, to see people not wearing masks. They may have felt that was threatening, or maybe I'm wrong about that, but that didn't bother me a ton. But I tried. Just I hated it. I hated wearing masks. Um,
Hmm.
but I knew it was the official policy of BYU, an institution that I supported. I support the mission of BYU that is aligned with the mission of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter Day Saints. Um, I said that's the policy, and if I have to do this, sure, whatever, because I'm getting life changing experiences and opportunities from coming to BYU, and if for a short time I have to do that, then that's fine. But yeah, like I say, that was the first two semesters, and then the yeah, I think during the middle of my second semesters, or near the end of my second semester, is when that mask mandate dropped. And I honestly remember the day when it was dropped. It was a pretty big celebration for a lot of I studied construction management, and the grand majority of us in that program are on the conservative side of the aisle, and it's no secret that most conservatives were ones that didn't like mask mandates and wearing masks. And so I remember that day. People were happy, in my close circle of my program. Um, just cause it just I don't yeah, just cause who knows? But it was a fun day, and but yeah, BYU was incredible. And it was a great time to be a BYU student for the especially for football. BYU's football team performed especially well while I was there, and basketball got really hot near the end of my last year. Was a great year. That's a little caveat side note, but because but I love BYU, and I loved my time there, and I'll always call myself a BYU Cougar, and an alumnus of BYU, and I'll be proud of it. I loved my time there, and it's where I met my wife. You know, if nothing else, if it was where I met my wife, I better be thankful for that place.
Definitely. She's the best. So only good things about her. So you decided to study construction management. Was this always something that you were interested in studying, or was there kind of like a path that led
No,
you to want to do this?
no, it's so yeah, my family has no background in construction. We have a background in agriculture, which, it's kind of the same. It's the same, outdoor kind of. You think of construction workers, you think of maybe I guess I'm assuming, Kate. I don't know, but I think most people think of, rugged, getting things, working with their hands. But no, I had no background in construction. I originally wanted to be a the church has a for the members that are the young members that are in their high school years. They'll have a program called seminary, which, part of each of their school days, they'll take an hour to study the gospel. Um, and well, in some places like Utah and parts of Idaho, that will actually be during the school day at their high school. Um, and in other places it will be kind of before school, online, or at a kind of thing where maybe the church membership is lower, or spaced out between locations. But I wanted to be a seminary teacher for a long time. But on my mission, I had a companion that's still one of my best friends today, that told me he was going to study construction management at BYU. And my first thought was, I didn't know that construction was something that you studied in college. Which, looking back now, it's like, well, the type of buildings that are being put up, and the type of projects that are being put up, why would I ever think that? They're incredibly complex. But that was my first thought. And so, to be a seminary teacher, you don't necessarily need any specific degree, just a degree in general. It will do. And so, my first semester, I said, well, I don't really know what I want to study, so I'll take this introduction construction management course, because my good friend is going to do that. And I took it, and it was life changing. The professor I had, his name is James Smith, um, one of the best people I know. And he says, first day of class, he says, my job is, by the end of this class, you should know if you want to stay in this industry. And he did a good job, because by the end of that class, I knew, yeah, this is what I want to do. And so I kept going with that. It's a little longer of a program. It took me 5 years, beginning to start to graduate. Unlike you, Kate, you plugged right through, and you graduated very quickly. But it took me an extra year. But I loved every single one of my classes in the construction management program. It's a program that is very united. That you will go into the Snell building. It's right there on the BYU campus where most of our classes are, and you will undoubtedly you'll find several study groups of people just having a good time, and talking about the different classes that they're in, and helping each other. That's one thing I really love about this industry, that people, especially, people that are already working in the industry, they're eager to be mentors, and they're eager to impart their knowledge. I feel like there are a lot of industries where people are trying to, keep things close to the belt, and keep a leg up on their other colleagues. It's constantly viewing it as competition, and I understand that to a certain extent. But I love the camaraderie, in my industry, and specifically at the construction management program at BYU. So, and and again, another thing, the industry is very, very eager to get students experience. I worked during each of my school years. I worked part-time during the school year, and then an internship every single year of school during the summer that was full time. Just companies are eager to get students with experience. That's what they care about most. I never had an employer ask about my grades. It was all about, what's your experience up to this point. Even though I tried to get good grades, and I feel like I generally got good grades, but I love this industry and BYU and the construction management program. Great professors. I can't say enough good things about it.
That's so awesome. I love that you found something that you are super excited about, that you're passionate about. Like that's the dream, right? Is to find a career that you
Yep.
just love. You love going to work every day. And
Mm-hmm.
that's so cool. I'm so glad you were able to find that. Um, so I wanted to dive into dating Malia and marrying
Mm-hmm.
Malia and all things about her because again, she's just so awesome. She has a very different upbringing than you, and this is something that I asked her as well. So I'm interested to hear your take, but I wanted to see if that was a difficult time for you, like navigating her different experience as a person of color, as a woman, with your own experience, and like, yeah, was that kind of a difficult thing for you guys to kind of merge those two identities, I guess, into one
Mm-hmm.
family?
There were certainly times that were difficult. To say the whole thing was difficult, that's not how I feel, because I the great majority of it I view as jovial, and I look back on it with very fond memories. Again, anyone that hasn't listened to what Malia said, so she's half Hispanic. Her ethnicity is half Hispanic, and then her father's side, and then on her mother's side, um, she's a quarter Polynesian, Tongan specifically, and then a quarter white. That's uh, so she's a very, very rich blend of very strong cultures and strong families, and and so I mean, and again, we've already said I spent my mission in Chile. I spoke Spanish and was very comfortable, speaking Spanish, which is something that her family loves to do, and their heritage still influences their traditions, and how they live in a very strong way, which I think that's how it should be. I think people should love where they've come from, um, because we owe something to the people that have come before us. I'm very big on tradition, and uh, and that's why I think I was drawn to Malia. That's at least in part because she did and does honor her upbringing and the her family members that came before her, their sacrifices um, and just what they've done to help her be where she is today. Um, that was so fun to get to dive into all that. I remember the first time she grew up in Washington State, and I remember the first time I met her family. I traveled up there for New Year's. We'd only been dating for uh, about 2 months, right around there, and I said, "Hey, what do you think if I came up and met your family?" And she agreed. Thank goodness. And I met her family, and her family was very, very accepting of me, of this skinny white boy. And I'm glad they are. I have incredible in-laws, and just even from that first time I met them, I understood why Malia is the way that she is, and why she's so wonderful, because they're wonderful, and that's that's definitely influenced by their willingness and love to conserve and um, perpetuate and keep living their traditions and uh, from their ancestry.
That's so cool. You guys are so cute. Yeah, I just love you guys so much. It's so
Mhm.
cute. Um, do you have any advice for people who might be in relationships with people who have opposing views? And this is something I talk with Malia about as well. But I've heard, countless times, so many times people saying, "Well, you can't really make it work. You have to really believe the same thing," specifically with politics. And I'm just like, you guys are a perfect example of how that's not always true, and you can make it work.
Mhm.
And so just curious, like if you have any advice for people who might be in relationships with people who have different opposing views and might be a little bit hesitant and like I don't know how you navigate that.
Yeah. And you bring up an important point. I really didn't talk in my last response about much about political views, but yes, that it is true. Malia and I, broadly speaking, we're on different sides of the political aisle, um, and and there have been moments where that has been hard. I won't lie. But I will unwaveringly say that it has been worth it. That it has been a decision to marry Malia and build a life with her, has enriched my life and my views, um, more than any other thing. And for anyone that thinks that it's impossible to make it work with someone that you know disagrees with you on that disagrees with you on political matters. I would ask. I say, well, what do you mean? Clarify. Because I think there are very core things that if you disagree with someone on those things, you probably shouldn't marry them. I do think you can be friends with any person of any political leaning or ideology. I genuinely believe that. Marriage is a different thing. Marriage is a different relationship than friendship. And but Malia and I, um, we are unified on the core on what we think are the core things of our life. Of we're like she's also a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter Day Saints, and we both believe in its doctrines and what and on the teachings of Jesus Christ, and when those things come up that we do disagree on, um, it's helpful to remember that okay, we might disagree on this one thing, but on what is most important we agree, and we have to, if we want to grow in our love for each other, we have to let those things prevail. And and we have a saying that we ascribe to in our marriage, that we say, in this family, uh, growth is allowed. It's allowed. We can have conversations, and the conversations can go any number of ways, and however the conversation ends, we know, okay, we're just going to grow, and we're just going to keep learning. And that's a very secure thing that I think helps both of us, knowing that we don't have to feel pressure to change, like, immediately and drastically change who we are and what we believe. We will, yes, over years we will both influence each other, in certain ways, but but that can happen in a process of growth. It doesn't need to be immediate, or we don't have to feel any pressure or obligation to anything, saying, well, it's this thing, it's a deal breaker, it's got to be, you gotta, it's my way or the highway. That doesn't exist in our marriage. So it can be done. And not only can it be done, it doesn't need to be suffered through. again, that my marriage with Malia has been uh, the most enriching thing I've ever done and will ever do, because it will never end. Our marriage will go on, and I'll keep learning. And I hope I don't think I have that much to teach her, but I'm sure she'll learn some things from me, and it's going to be wonderful. I have no doubts about it.
So cool. Such a cool perspective to have you both be able to share that. And yeah, I love that, focusing on the growth and that you can grow together. I think that's so powerful and so cool. And in all types of relationships, you mentioned friendships, you mentioned marriages, but like you can grow together. And as long as you're willing to like work with each other, I think that's yeah, that's key. So I think that's so cool. Um, so shifting to one last topic I wanted to touch on before we get into some more specific political beliefs, but this
Mm-hmm.
past year with the Trump administration, it's been particularly difficult for minority communities. And I'm just
Mm-hmm.
wondering, like, having a wife that is mixed race, have your beliefs about the world changed at all? Perhaps seeing some new challenges that she's faced as a result of the current political climate?
They've definitely they've definitely changed. They've definitely been it's added layers to my belief. You know, it's kind of helped me see, okay, what are the priorities in certain things. Um, you know, I've I've tried to be very conscious about specifically hearing what Malia feels and how these things are affecting her. And and hearing what she has to say, and just sitting back and thinking, okay, well then how should that how should and how does that affect, you know, my views? Obviously, immigration is a very hot and sensitive topic as of late. Um, something it's certainly complex. To say that it's simple is incorrect. It's narrow minded. Um, and this past several months has only convinced me more of that it is complex. That um, you know, a cut and dry view of that um, may may be sufficient in the short run, but in the long run, it's you have to acknowledge that there's complexity and a lot of layers. No action is isolated, right? Every action is going to have effects that's trickle down and that have lasting impacts for many years, many decades, many generations. It's 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 been hard. There have been a lot of hard nights, hard long nights that we've talked about this, and Malia has been very open and vulnerable with me about what she's feeling and experiencing. We the congregation where we currently attend church is um, predominantly and intentionally that's Hispanic. All the services are done in Spanish, um, and we chose that intentionally. We again we love to speak Spanish, and I specifically love Malia's heritage in that, and we actually in coming years would love to. The company that I work for uh, does projects in South America, and we would love to, you know, do one or two of those and spend some time abroad, just to keep, you know, growing our our you know our experience and you know all the different experiences that contribute to who we are. But I guess basic going back, I would say in essence, it's definitely just made me think the past several months of the political atmosphere in the U.S. have definitely just said, okay, things are complex, like, and I can't be gung ho about any one side. I have to say I understand what this person and this group is saying, because a lot of the things that they say, like I I can there are people in groups that when I hear, you know, what they're saying, I could say I understand that, and a lot of it I honestly agree with. I Those are values that I hold, and then I can say the same thing about the other side of an argument, something like immigration, where I understand that people are sacrificing, making immense sacrifices, not for themselves, um, not necessarily that they'll even see the 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 harvest of those sacrifices in their own lifetime, but that's for their families. That's something I is at the core of my my life views. That we are less individuals with rights. Certainly, we are individuals, and we do have rights. But we're even more where we are we are parts of families, and we have duties, we have obligations to others, in our families, in our communities, um, and so I understand that so much about people that have immigrated to this country. Um, so it's something that I've spent many long hours thinking about, and have and I'm currently, my status on it is it's complex, and to be hasty about things, and say this is the final answer, and we're going guns a blazing on it, I think is it can have some negative, some definitely some negative effects on the nation as a whole.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. I'm curious, like, how you balance these like personal experiences, you know, talking with your wife and everything, and then also identifying with more conservative values. I'm curious, like, how do you balance that? Because, you know, our current administration is more conservative, and
Mhm.
it would, you know, be easy for you to also subscribe to that, and but you also got this other personal connection, and so I'm just curious, like, how you balance that.
How I balance it, it's well, it's I when the two conflict, I do my best, and I don't always do the best job of this, but I try to let things fall in their proper order, right? My my relationship to God is the most important thing in my life, followed by my relationship with my wife, and then to my family, uh, and then my country, and then people generally. And so, um, in those moments, that genuinely does help. I say, well, in this, like in any given, in X situation, well, my priority right now is to support my wife, and love her and cherish her. My my priority my priority right now um, is not to you know, drill down on a certain view or certain policy or position. That's not the priority. Um, and I think that's a and I think I, my stance on that approach, I feel like that is a conservative approach. again, like you have a certain order of duty and a certain order of um, people that you have obligations to. Um, so it's so again in those moments where a conservative policy and a a personal relationship or things like that where they clash, I can choose the relationship and make sure that is cared for and attended to, and then also at the same time say, well, that is what a conservative does. They care for their loved ones and make sure that that their that their obligations are met to the most important people first. Um, so that helps me balance. Again, it's not easy. It's not always easy, and I don't always do the best job of it. But that has helped, is knowing that I it's I have to see the more lasting relationships and identities in a higher plane than the more temporary relationships and identities.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that's really helpful for people to hear, especially people who like we're both white and we don't experience things similarly to people of
Mm-hmm.
color and minority groups in this country. And so I think that's really helpful to like understand and to hear your perspective on how
Mm-hmm.
we can be more understanding and still holding on to like you can still hold on to your conservative views, you can still hold on to the things that make you you, but just like being sympathetic to other communities and learning how to navigate that. So I think that's
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
really cool. Um, so shifting into like some specific political views, you've mentioned that you are more conservative leaning. I don't know if you like fully identify as like Republican, registered Republican, but I'm curious like if that specific identification or if that label impacts your life at all.
I mean, I do identify as a Republican. That's not the label I usually use when people will ask me about my political beliefs. I usually say I'm conservative.
Hmm.
That's because there are certain goals that you know labeled Republicans may take that I would say no, I don't agree with that. I don't think the that's that's not conservative. That is not a conservative policy, and I don't think that's a good policy. Um, but I certainly I try to let it not influence my life, um, because the identity that I the identities that I most try to let influence my life and my beliefs is my identity as a disciple of Christ, as a member of his church, and as a husband, and hopefully one day as a father. Um, those are the identities that I care most about, and my political beliefs. I try to let my political beliefs be influenced by those things rather than the other way around. That's a very pretty way of painting it, and it doesn't always work out that way. And when it doesn't, that's when I try to um, repent and hopefully am conscious enough to see that, oh geez, I let my political leanings affect my my religious or my familial obligations, and that's, to me, that's not okay. So I'm not perfect, Kate. You've been around me long enough to know that I'm not. But Yeah, that's so those are that's again. I mean, you asked the question about how I identify myself politically. That's and how that affects me. That would be my answer.
No, I think that's great. And I mean, you're as perfect as anyone else's, right? Like we're all human and we all are working through this and trying
Yes.
to figure out our place in the world. And so I think that's, giving ourselves grace and stuff is really great. So I'm curious, based on like this specific identification and some of the experiences that we've talked about today, what are the things that you are most passionate about? And we've talked a little bit about like immigration, Second Amendment rights, but just what are some things that you are super passionate about politically?
Yeah, and it's funny because those are I do care about those things. Those aren't necessarily though the things that I'm most passionate about. I feel like they've just come up in our conversation thus far. But I'm most um, I'm most passionate about things that I'm most passionate about issues and policies that touch and affect the family. I view the family and not necessarily the individual as the fundamental political unit that we ought to see ourselves as part of families before we see ourselves as again before we see ourselves, not to say we don't see ourselves as individuals, but see ourselves as part of families, family units, um, um, and focus on our obligations and doing things that help families grow and create create loving homes and supportive homes in which people can flourish. I genuinely believe in the family and at home is where people can and should flourish the most. And so any policy that um, I feel um, buoys that up and supports that, I'm I'm very likely to say yeah, let's do it. And things that I feel are against that and cut that off the ability to for families to grow together and flourish. I'm very likely to be staunchly against those things.
Thank you for sharing that and being so passionate about that. I think that's a really good thing to be passionate about for sure. So shifting into some final thoughts, what do you hope that people take away from this interview with you?
Never be the one that ends a relationship, a friendship, a marriage, between siblings or parents. Never, please, never be the one that cuts that off due to a political thing. It's so not worth it. People are of infinite worth. We need to be careful in this life and try to care for those around us um, and um, letting things that will only affect us, for the 80 or so years that we're allowed on this earth, I think is so just superficial and so short-sighted and not worth it. That I hope people do that. I hope people understand that it's good to have opinions. To be just say, oh, I don't care, like I'm just gonna I'm just gonna mind my own business. I don't agree with that though. I don't agree with just not interacting with people and not talking about things that affect us. Um, you ought to think about things. You ought to think about how we relate to each other, um, and and try to seek truth from reliable sources. That you should try and understand things, but never but again, going back, never let a misunderstanding or a disagreement be the ending of a relationship. It's not worth it.
I love that advice so much. What do you wish that people better understood about you and then others who see the world similarly to you?
I hope people understand about me that life isn't easy, and I'm trying just like everyone. I try to understand things. I try to know things, and I try to let good things and true things affect um, how I think and how I behave. Um, I hope they know about me that I love my wife. I love my family. They're they're the greatest blessings in my life. I hope they know I have great friends like Kate Hall, and uh, and that um, I love my upbringing. And there's probably a lot of other things that I wish they knew about me, but I would rather that they got to know those things about me by talking to me and you know getting to know me like you've gotten to know me, Kate.
Gosh, I didn't even have to pay you to give me a shout out. That's fabulous. Well, thank you so much. Any parting thoughts before we wrap this up? I think that was all of my questions. So,
Parting thoughts, I'd say I think this year BYU football probably another 10-2 regular season record. I don't think that's going to be enough to get them into the college football playoff, and BYU basketball. A lot of high hopes for this upcoming season. Who knows what's going to happen. But I'm joking, Kate. Those are insignificant things. But
no, that's perfect.
I
Well,
love them.
everyone can stay tuned for that, and maybe we'll have you
Please,
back on to give an update.
please do go Cougs. Yes, and
Post-season update with Colton.
yeah. I hope that's a good update.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Colton. I really
Of
appreciate
course.
just being honest and vulnerable and sharing everything. And yeah, this has been great.
It has been. I love. I could have gone another couple of hours, Kate. I love conversations like this.